My name is Ren, and the night everything changed, I was wearing my grandmother's old cardigan, the cream one with the loose button, because the family reunion had moved inside, and the farmhouse air conditioning ran cold enough to make your teeth ache. We were 17 people crammed into my aunt's living room, the kind of gathering that looks warm in photographs and feels like negotiating a minefield in person. Someone had brought a volleyball net. My brother Garrett thought it would be funny to spike the ball directly at me from 6 feet away, full force, while I wasn't looking. I heard the impact before I felt it. Then I felt it, a white-hot detonation behind my left eye, and my knees just decided they were done. I went down onto the hardwood and curled instinctively, the way a body does when it's trying to protect itself from something it doesn't yet understand. "You're fine," my father said, not moving from his chair. Garrett laughed first. Then a few others, nervously, the way people laugh when they're waiting to see if something was actually funny. My cousin Petra was the only one who knelt down beside me, her hand on my back, her voice quiet and certain.
"Ren.
Something is wrong." Petra drove me to the urgent care 20 minutes from the farmhouse because nobody else offered and I couldn't see straight enough to argue. I remember the ride in fragments, the way the streetlights smeared when I tried to focus on them, the faint ringing in my left ear that had started soft and was getting less soft, Petra's hands tight on the wheel while she asked me questions to keep me conscious and present. "What year is it? Name 5 things you can see. Stay with me, Ren." My mother texted while we were in the waiting room. "Dinner's ready when you're back. Don't make it dramatic." I stared at that message long enough that Petra leaned over and read it. She didn't say anything. She just took my phone gently and turned it face down on the seat between us. The urgent care physician took one look at my pupil response and sent us directly to the hospital. No discussion. His exact words were, "This cannot wait." They ordered the MRI at midnight. I lay inside the machine while it hammered and hummed around me, thinking about how Garrett had laughed, how my father hadn't stood up, how my mother's first instinct was to call me dramatic before she even knew what was wrong. The technician's face, when she came back in, told me something before she said a single word. The neurologist was a soft-spoken man named Dr. Okafor who delivered serious information the way a good doctor does, directly, without cushioning it so much that it lost its shape. There was a bleed. Small, he said, but located in a place that made small irrelevant as a comfort. Behind my left eye, pressing against the optic nerve, in a region where untreated pressure had a documented history of becoming something permanent and catastrophic. He used the word fortunate twice, once about the timing, once about Petra's decision not to wait until morning. I lay in the hospital bed and listened to him explain what the next 72 hours would look like, and I felt remarkably calm in the way that people feel calm when the situation has moved beyond the range of emotions they've prepared for. Petra sat in the chair beside me, still in her reunion clothes, her mascara slightly smudged, writing down everything Dr. Okafor said in the notes app on her phone with focused, quiet determination. After he left, she was silent for a moment. Then she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before, something between grief and fury, carefully controlled. "Ren," she said, "you need to call a lawyer." I looked at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hummed above us, steady and indifferent. "I know," I said. I spent 3 days in the hospital. Nobody from my immediate family came. My mother called once on the second morning and spent 4 of the 7 minutes explaining how Garrett felt terrible and how I needed to understand he didn't mean it, and how making a big deal out of this would ruin the family dynamic she'd spent years carefully maintaining. I held the phone against my ear and watched a pigeon on the window ledge outside do absolutely nothing, and I thought about how she'd used the word dynamic like it was something worth protecting. My father didn't call at all. Petra came every day. She brought real food, a phone charger, and on the 3rd morning, a business card for an attorney named Marcus Webb who specialized in personal injury and had a reputation, she said, that made insurance companies nervous. I asked her how she found him. She said she'd spent my first night in the hospital researching while I slept, because someone had to. I held the card for a long time. Marcus Webb. The cardstock was heavy, the font clean and understated. The kind of card that didn't need to try hard. Dr. Okafor discharged me with a folder of follow-up instructions and a referral to a specialist. He shook my hand at the door and said, with quiet emphasis, "Please don't let this go undocumented." I didn't intend to. Marcus Webb's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with windows that looked out over the city, like it was something he'd already accounted for. He was younger than I expected, unhurried in his movements, and he listened to everything I said without writing a single note until I finished. Then he picked up his pen and didn't put it down for 20 minutes. He told me the MRI results, combined with the documented timeline and Dr. Okafor's discharge notes, established clear causation. The witness factor strengthened everything. Petra had already agreed to provide a formal statement, which Marcus said with a quiet satisfaction of someone who understood exactly what that was worth. He pulled up something on his screen and turned it toward me. Medical liability, negligence, pain and suffering, lost wages. I'd missed 2 weeks of work already, and the specialist appointments weren't finished. He walked me through each category with the same tone a good architect uses when explaining load-bearing walls. Methodical.
Certain.
Then he mentioned my homeowner's liability coverage and asked if my aunt knew the reunion was being held at her property. I hadn't thought about that.
He had.
Before I left, he made one thing clear. I was not to contact my family about any of this. No texts, no calls, no explanations. Let the paperwork do the talking, he said. It already had plenty to say. The paperwork reached my family on a Thursday morning, which I knew because Garrett called me 4 times before noon, and I watched every single call go to voicemail with the focused tranquility of someone who had recently been advised by counsel. My mother texted at 12:17. "Ren, this is insane. He is your brother. You are tearing this family apart over an accident." I photographed the text and forwarded it to Marcus because he told me to document every contact attempt. I was becoming very good at documentation. My aunt called Petra, which was a strategic mistake because Petra had spent 3 nights in a hospital chair and had approximately no patience left for damage control conversations. Petra told me about it afterward, calmly, over coffee. My aunt had cried, then gotten angry, then suggested that Ren had always been sensitive, and this was simply her being dramatic again. Petra had ended the call. What my family hadn't accounted for was the specialist report, which arrived that same week. The pressure on my optic nerve had caused measurable vision changes in my left eye, subtle, the specialist said, but documented, permanent, and directly attributable to blunt force trauma sustained at the documented time and location. Permanent changed the number Marcus put in the demand letter. It changed it considerably. The demand letter went out on a Monday. By Wednesday, my aunt had retained her own attorney, which Marcus told me with a neutral tone of someone who'd expected exactly that and prepared for it anyway. My father called that Wednesday evening. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the reunion, since your find delivered from an armchair without a single movement toward his daughter on the floor. He sounded different now, tighter, carefully measured, like he'd rehearsed the call or someone had coached him. He said, he loved me. He said Garrett was devastated. He said the family needed to handle this privately, internally the way families do. I let him finish. Then I told him, very quietly, that I had permanent vision damage in my left eye, that I had documentation supporting every element of my claim, and that the time to handle things privately had been the moment I hit the floor, and nobody moved. He was silent for a long time. "Ren, don't," I said. "Just that. One word." I ended the call and sat with the silence afterward, letting it settle around me like something that finally fit correctly. Marcus called the next morning. The insurance carrier had made contact. They wanted to negotiate rather than litigate, which he explained meant they'd reviewed the specialist report and made a very rational decision about their own exposure. He used the word significant when describing where he expected this to land. The settlement was reached on a quiet Friday in November, 6 months after volleyball and my brother's carelessness rearranged the entire trajectory of my life. I didn't celebrate. I sat in Marcus's office while the final documents were signed, and I felt something more complicated than victory, the heavy, clarifying grief for the family I'd apparently never actually had, mixed with a clean, steady relief that I'd finally stopped pretending otherwise. The amount covered every medical bill, every specialist visit, every missed paycheck, and then kept going in the way that permanent damage tends to when it's properly documented and competently argued. Marcus shook my hand at the door with the quiet satisfaction of someone who never doubted the outcome. Petra took me to dinner that evening. We sat at a corner table and ordered good wine and didn't talk about any of it for the first hour, which was exactly what I needed. My family never apologized. Not formally, not privately, not in any of the ways that might have meant something. Garrett sent a single text 4 months in, "Hope you're good," that I read once and never responded to. I moved to a new apartment in January. Lighter, quieter. A window in the kitchen that caught the morning sun at an angle that made everything look deliberate and warm. My left eye still catches light differently than my right. Some mornings I barely notice. Most mornings I remember exactly who taught me the difference between people who show up and people who simply occupy space.